All right. Thanks again, everybody, for joining us today for another episode of Spincast. Joining us today, we have Sergio BRACK. He's joining us from Ole Miss University and their esports club. He is the president of their esports club there. He resides originally from the Chicago area, but I'll let him kind of talk a little bit about who he is, how he got to Ole Miss from Chicago, what brought him there, as well as what got him into the esports space and to the role that he's currently in. So without further ado, Sergio, thank you so much for joining us today. How are you doing today?
No problem. I'm honored to be here. I'm doing pretty good. So I'm Sergio. Like you gave me a pretty good intro. It's hard to top that one. But I'm president of Ole Miss Esports. Like you said, I originally resided in Chicago, Illinois. Lived there for most of my life, and then decided to come to Ole Miss because I needed a little something different. I had family in Mississippi, and so I had visited Ole Miss before, and it just felt like home. I was always into like competitive gaming, I guess you could say. I started playing Call of Duty when I was really young, found out about the MLG scene and sort of transitioned right into it. And got to Ole Miss, saw they didn't have a Call of Duty team, and also saw that Call of Duty wasn't really represented in the collegiate esports space. So I created my own league, College COD actually. And from there, just been put in multiple leadership positions within my organization until I eventually got up to president.
Got it. That's awesome. That's awesome. So Call of Duty is your game of choice, huh?
So I dabble in just about everything, but Call of Duty is where I got my start, and that's where I competed in my whole life, basically. Yeah.
Gotcha. I actually play that on occasion. That's kind of a great stress relief for me.
Yeah,
Not competitive, but I'll dabble in it. So talk about that a little bit. So you came to Ole Miss. They didn't have Call of Duty. Talk about where Ole Miss was as an esports club, team, etc. then, and the growth of it just in the short time you've been there, 3-4 years. How does it look now versus then?
So when the organization was first created, our first president, Craig Penniston, and then we had another vice president, Gage Engel, they created it together. And from there, it was a strictly League of Legends organization. And Gage had the idea of, hey, let's not make this just League of Legends. Let's increase that, make it bigger, and incorporate more games into it. And so when I first joined, the biggest thing going was like the fighting game community, Smash, Tekken, Mortal Kombat, and that kind of stuff. They were pretty much taking off with that. League of Legends. We also had a really good PUBG team. And all these, besides the fighting games, are PC esports. And of course, console esports have always been looked down upon for the most part in comparison to esports that take place on PC. So I sort of figured that we wouldn't have a Call of Duty team just because at that time it wasn't one of the bigger esports. And so when I joined, the first thing I asked was, hey, do you guys have a Call of Duty team? And people just sort of looked at me puzzled and almost like chuckled at me. I was like, but I was serious, right? And so I vowed from that day forward to make sure that, nobody that comes to their university and ask the same question is going to get the same reaction. They're going to be more eager about it and more willing to create a Call of Duty team. And so that's what that was sort of where it took off for me in terms of collegiate esports.
Awesome. Let's talk about that for a minute, because that's an interesting point that I haven't talked too much about. But if you look at traditional sports like baseball, well, if you go to Ole Miss to play baseball, well, you kind of have to know how to play baseball, and that's the only option you have pretty much.
Right.
But with esports, if you're really good at a specific title game and there's not a club or a team necessarily for it, well, then it's just a matter of maybe finding a couple more kids that are either A, pretty good at it, or willing to venture into it and get better and potentially put that team together pretty quickly, wouldn't you say?
Right. And, and I know a lot of people get discouraged when they find out about collegiate esports in a particular university. And it doesn't even have to be in a university level, right? We can talk about like high school, middle school, esports organizations. They find out their school doesn't have one and they sort of just get defeated and don't want to take initiative to do anything about it. But it can literally take just one talk with a faculty member, one talk with your friends in the classroom, because the video game in general, even if you take out the esports factor, video games are too big for people not to be interested around you. These universities have thousands of students. These high schools even are starting to have thousands of students within them. And somebody else is interested in what you're interested in, and somebody else has that same drive and initiative. You just have to, do your research and find out who it is.
Yeah, no doubt about it. That's an interesting point, because I think if you go into a room, a high school gym, if, for example, and ask everybody, hey, raise your hand if you've ever tried gaming, just about everybody,
Hmm.
especially nowadays, we're all
Right,
kind of stuck at home.
right, for sure.
Um, Pretty much every hand would go up. Now it's just a matter of finding the likes in terms of what games they can play together and things like that. So that's cool. Talk about your club there at Ole Miss. How many students total? How often do you guys get out to compete? Are you in season, out of season? How does it all work?
So like I said before, we sort of encompass multiple esports at this point. This is the first year we've been considered a varsity program on campus. The first year just a club, but now the school is backing us, so they fund us in terms of travel, fun tournaments we go to, stuff like that. So what that's looked like for the most part is when we travel to different tournaments. I think the biggest one we traveled to this past semester was DreamHack Atlanta. So we went out to Atlanta as a team. The school paid for our bus. They paid for our hotel rooms. And all we had to pay for was food, which is, unheard of at a lot of universities. So we're very grateful for that. But our biggest esports right now are probably Call of Duty, CSGO. We have a really, really good Rocket League team, but we also compete in Overwatch. Pretty much any esports you could think of, we pretty much compete in. So it's definitely a super diverse community. And I want to emphasize the community part, because while we do have the competitive side, the community side is just as important to us. And we really, really take people under the wing that might not necessarily, want to compete, but they really have a passion for gaming or have a passion for graphic design, videography, stuff like that, because that's all things that we need. So it's just a really, really nice and dope community to be a part of. Even if you're, like I said, just a gamer and outside of the esports side of things, but we try to balance out both.
Awesome. Awesome. You bring up some more interesting points, because the pathway to go pro in any sport is incredibly difficult,
Mm-hmm.
right? No matter if you're
Right.
football, basketball, esports, very rarely do guys get to that pro level.
Mm-hmm.
So talk about some of the pathways or opportunities that will be left for people that are involved in esports currently, and career-wise. What do you see as opportunities once you guys are done?
So I have one more semester here as a president, and like one of the things that I really, really tried hard to work on, because my previous title actually was the head of competitive operations, so I handle all of our competitive teams. I work with the administration to see the advancement of our competitive teams, and through that role, I got to have the meeting where we actually decided to create a varsity program instead of just being a club from that point forward. And so the biggest thing for me is, number one, scholarships. A lot of esports organizations on the western side of the country have already started this process, which is fine. The Southeast and the East in general is a little behind on it from a collegiate esports side of things. So scholarships, and then just facilities. And I think career-wise, one of the things that we can look forward to is a lot more universities hiring a lot more esports personnel within the faculty. You can go on LinkedIn or hit Marker Jobs right now, and you'll find, this many universities, looking for esports coordinators, esports coaches even. So I definitely think from a collegiate standpoint, from our perspective, by the time I leave, I'm hoping that Ole Miss, realizes, hey, this is something that we need full-time employees for, because this is something serious that can, not only bring in revenue, but it can bring in talent from an academic standpoint and from an esports standpoint.
Yeah, no doubt about it. That's exciting. And I think it's such a great opportunity, especially for those younger kids that are starting to look at this a little bit more seriously. And for some of the middle schools, high schools that are starting to kind of embrace it and say, well, how does this benefit some of these students? I think the opportunities
Mm-hmm.
certainly are out there. So who's your biggest rival?
Mississippi State Esports. That's our rival in football and stuff. So that's always going to be our rival in esports as well. It's just natural. But I think it's a lot healthier on the esports side of things. I think we're both pretty encouraging of each other's programs, because we realize that, at least in the space that collegiate esports is in right now, a win for one organization is a win for another, because administration can see, oh, Ole Miss just got this facility over at MSU, and then MSU's administration is like, oh gosh, now we got to top that. So now we got to get them a facility, right? So it's definitely healthy, and I think it's benefited both for our organizations. Our football teams host the Egg Bowl every year against each other, and so the previous presidents, the first presidents of both of the organizations actually came together and decided that we should do an esports egg bowl. And so we've done that for the past 2 years now. The first year, Ole Miss hosted it, and MSU actually won. It's essentially a best of 7 between different esports. So we play Call of Duty, Overwatch, Rocket League, League of Legends, Counter-Strike, and Smash. And obviously the team that wins the 4 games out of the 7 wins. And so we hosted it the first year. We lost. MSU took the trophy home, and they got to put it on display. Luckily, when I first took office for the head of competitive operations role, one of my pitch to people to vote me in was like, if you vote me in, we are going to win the esports egg bowl. And this year I was sitting on the edge of my seat at the egg bowl praying that we won so I can keep my promise, and luckily we pulled it off.
Nice.
So yeah, I definitely think there are rivals, but I think the rivalry has caused administration to definitely put more eyes on our organizations to a point where without that rivalry, I don't know if Ole Miss Esports or MSU Esports would be in the same boat that we're in now in terms of backing from our universities.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Rivalries can be good. And hey, guess what? Last year, you got to walk out on top with the Egg Bowl Championship. So that's awesome. That's awesome.
Yep.
Well, Sergio, thank you so much for giving us a little bit of insight into what is going on with Ole Miss and their esports program. I got to be honest, I keep talking to a number of collegiate kids that are running up their programs and things like that. And it's impressive to me that students just like yourself take the initiative and are doing the right things, circling this esports space, because it tells me there's a sincerely bright future ahead for a number of these programs. Right. So kudos to you. We wish you the best of luck.
Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. We wish you the best of luck, and we'll be looking at next year's Egg Bowl, see if you guys can make 2 in a row.
I hope so. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no worries. Have a great day. Thanks again, and we will talk again soon, hopefully. Yes, sir.